I guess they've got the mic, so.
Thank you so much for putting a human face on people that are our enemies, supposedly.
Thank you.
One of my good friends and a great Texan is Dar Jamal. And Dar is a warrior, fearless, and was in Fallujah, was in Lebanon in '06. And, you know, Cheney said this is a test bed. This is a test bed. It's an experiment. And I wanted you to comment a little bit about when they purged Fallujah, pushed all the men, women, and children out, allowed them back in, you know, separate lines for everyone, gave them biometric IDs. And then the second siege of Fallujah, we had the Talon swords offloaded. We had the friend or foe identifiers on our troops. And I just wanted to have you talk about the high-tech aspect of clearing a city, identifying the people, and then I understand what white phosphorus has been used for. It's a target marking device for fighter-bomber attacks. Well, now they seem to have created a microtized dust. And when you saw the Westland Lynx helicopter shooting the white phosphorus rockets down, they would airburst and then descend like a fog down upon the people. And you would see people burned, cooked, alive, but their clothing would be intact because it would mix with the moisture in their skin and literally cook them. And I really just wanted you to talk about these different sieges of Fallujah and what you researched and found out about our high-tech weaponry on civilian populations.
Thank you. What we've done in Fallujah, which, again, this was Toshaku Nidoi who made this documentary, which obviously has gotten very little exposure. That first siege of Fallujah estimated killed about 600 people, and then the second siege killed over maybe 2,000 to 6,000. And again, this is in a country of 26 million. With that siege, again, these were prior to the siege of Fallujah. The American military administrators consulted with the Israeli forces on what they'd done in Jenin in Palestine in 2002, and copied their tactics. That's actually pretty much covered the extent of my knowledge too, because I read a lot of Dar Jamal. He's a big source for me. So what happened was they did allow and people fled for their lives when the bombings were coming. And what we said was like, hey, we told you to leave. If you stayed behind, you must be our enemy. But if you think of what happens in a disaster, let's take Hurricane Katrina. Who's left behind? If you could leave, you got out. But very old, very young, very poor, very sick, very weak. That's who's left behind. So, and those are the people who pay the highest price. So those individuals stayed behind. And actually, from the reading that I've done, you know, if you tell me you're going to attack and, you know, the resistance left, they're like, fine, you're going to blow it up. We're going to go wait for you to be finished. And then, you know, we will take you out one by one. And to get back into the city of Fallujah, it was a city of 300,000 people, reduced to around 100,000. I used to give these numbers when I lived in Colorado. So it's about the size of Colorado Springs. I'm not sure what city is 300,000 here. But after both sieges, 70% of the buildings in Fallujah were leveled to the ground. 70. And the buildings that remained sustained damage. So what they did was, they're like, all right, we'll let a few people back in and you can rebuild it for us. But you do need special identification. You have to get fingerprinted and retinal scanners. And so that's the freedom and democracy we brought them. The use of white phosphorus, there's an article from Field Artillery Journal about the Americans using white phosphorus in Fallujah. And, you know, yeah, that's all well and good. You need to see at night. But if your children are underneath those falling pieces of phosphorus, you might think twice about dropping it. And, you know, that's basically what it does to people, and the Israelis used it in the bombing of Gaza. They used it at the UN facilities. There's pictures all over the internet of that. I mean, that's straight up terrorism. But you know, if you're manufacturing these weapons, the more you use, the more you make. So that's where the profit, the quote unquote benefit, comes in. So I'm sorry, I didn't see where you went, but I hope I touched on those answers. Okay.
2 what is Zionism and a Zionist Jew?
Okay, that's thank you for giving me the opportunity to the best of my ability, explain. Zionism, as I defined it, is a political movement for the establishment of a Jewish state. Now, there are Jewish Zionists, which is actually pretty much except for my mom, the rest of that side of the family. And there are Christian Zionists, and they actually, a number of them out in Colorado, where I used to live. But it is part of that, when it gets into the religious philosophy of it, and why they Christian Zionists support Israel, that gets a little bit off my sphere of knowledge. But so, I mean, there's a film on Shalom TV. You can see Joe Biden like almost embracing the newscaster, saying, "You don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. I'm a Zionist." And I'm a little pissed because Joe Biden is my senator from Delaware. Now you're vice president. I don't own him anymore. But anyone can take that role. It's a political position rather than religious. So it can be, there is the International Anti-Zionist Jewish Federation that is coming about, and I have links to this there. So that's why I wanted to clarify that to be Jewish does not necessarily mean you're Zionist. To be Zionist doesn't necessarily mean you're Jewish. And I don't care what or who or anything you are, as long as you're against dead children and seeking justice.
Okay, I'd like to ask 2 questions, and you can choose which ones you want to answer.
Okay.
First one is, you've been involved in the anti-war movement, and I'd like to maybe have you comment on how leadership of the anti-war movement sold out to pro-war Democrats. Get the Democrats elected, the war will end. BS. The other question is, you concentrated on the activities of the Mossad, but in September 25th, 2005, news kind of stopped for me in Iraq about the Civil War, because British-trained Iraqi police were going after the suspicious car of Mahdi army people. When an Iraqi policeman approached the car, he was shot dead. They gave chase to it. They found these 2 guys dressed up as Mahdi army who were white British SAS agents. Yeah. They were imprisoned in Basra. The British, the Charge of the Light Brigade came with tanks and freed them. So this concept of this so-called civil war in Iraq and what's going on.
Sure, I'll touch on it very briefly, and Mr. Springman already mentioned what happened in September 2005 in Basra, and I have the pictures that show, they have their little dark wigs in the car, and the chefia, the Arabic scarf, and then there's these 2 white guys who got, they're pretty beat up in the pictures, but then it's this huge cache of weapons. They had a lot of weapons in the trunk of the car. It's unbelievable what's there. So I would say briefly, there was no civil war in Iraq before we showed up. This is the age-old tactic of divide and conquer. And when we leave, I am quite sure that the descendants of the cradle of civilization can throw something together to move forward in their own country. So I think I have to close it on that. But I will be on the panel, and I don't live that far, so as long as you want to stay here, I'll stay. Thank you all so very much. It's been an honor to be with you here today. Thank you.